This episode of the Momentum Podcast is going to be a little bit different. This is my 500th episode. I didn't ever consider when I started this that I would ever hit 500 podcast episodes, and I want to share with you the lessons I've learned, the insights I've gained, and what has come out of doing 500 Momentum Podcasts. I'm Alex Sharfin, and this is the Momentum Podcast, made for empire builders, game changers, trailblazers, shot takers, record breakers, world makers, and creators of all kinds. Those among us who can't turn it off and don't know why anyone would want to. We challenge complacency, destroy apathy, and we are obsessed with creating momentum so we can roll over bureaucracy and make our greatest contribution. Sure, we pay attention to their rules, but only so that we can bend them, break them, then rewrite them around our own will. We don't accept our destiny, we define it. We don't understand defeat because you only lose if you stop, and we don't know how. While the rest of the world strives for average and clings desperately to the status quo, we are the minority, the few, who are willing to hallucinate there could be a better future. And instead of just daydreaming of what could be, we endure the vulnerability and exposure it takes to make it real. We are the evolutionary hunters, clearly the most important people in the world, because entrepreneurs are the only source of consistent, positive human evolution, and we always will be. It is absolutely crazy to think that we have 500 podcast episodes for the Momentum Podcast. You know, if you haven't heard the story of how this started, in July of 2017, before that, we joined Russell Brunson's Inner Circle. And in July, Russell invited me and my family out to a place called Pirates Cove in Las Vegas. And I went to a multi-day mastermind with just some of the most incredible people I've ever met in my life. In fact, most of them are either clients of mine now or friends of mine now. Actually, all of them are friends or clients now, and just amazing human beings. And such an incredible week that we spent there learning and understanding and getting insights on our business. And one of those insights, Russell Brunson pulled me aside and he said, like, with the sincerity and seriousness and earnestness that only Russell can have, he said, hey, man, I would listen to you every day if you did a podcast. If you were willing to put a podcast out there, I'd listen to it, and I know other people would listen to it. I really think if you went back and you did a podcast where it was just you, don't do interviews, you know enough, just share what you know, and people will listen to it. And I remember thinking, well, if Russell says I should do this, I will. And it took me so long to record the first episode. I had it on my to-do list for 3 days. The feeling of imposter syndrome that I had before I recorded the first episode of this podcast was over the top. And then finally, I recorded episode number 1, my origin story. You can go listen to it if you want. I think it was only 6 or 7 minutes long. And it was like this massive relief. And then this instant, oh my gosh, am I going to do that every single day? Well, we started the podcast with only releasing a couple times a week. Then we increased it to 5 times a week. And now we're at 4 times a week. And it's been absolutely incredible. I think it's changed our business more than any single thing that we've done. The podcast has changed the business for the better. I think it's changed me as a business person for the better. So first, the podcast has become a major driver to our business. It's been a major driver to people understanding who we are, to understanding what we're doing. Here's what it's really like. It's like every single day I have an opportunity to do a keynote presentation for 10 to 15 minutes, sometimes 20 minutes, to up to 4,000 people a day. Since we started this, we've had over 1.5 million downloads. 1.5 million downloads is so overwhelming. It's incredible. But that means that over the course of the past couple of years, 1.5 million times somebody's listened to or at least downloaded one of our podcast episodes, and it just blows me away what a massive effect it's had on our business. Let me share just some of the impact and the change that we've seen. So number 1, first and foremost, it has helped me solidify our message more than I think anything I've ever done. Every single day I have to get up, or now that I'm batching it once or twice a week, I have to get up and record episodes of our content directed straight at you at our client, and I call everybody our client who listens to our podcast. Some of you haven't spent money yet, but I look at you as our client. You're paying in time and attention. And every day I get to get up in the morning or once I batch, I get to have this conversation with people who are willing to give us their time and attention. And I get to help you move forward. And every day that's given me this opportunity to look at our content in a new way, to look at what I'm doing in a new way, to look at the lessons I'm learning in a different way and share them with this audience that has become so loyal and shows up every day to listen. So that has been an incredible benefit to our business. And I would say it's just been a benefit to me as an author, as a speaker, as a business person. Doing a podcast this many times, doing 500 podcasts in 2 years has been this forging process of getting hyper clear on our message and understanding intimately who I'm talking to and really knowing our clients. And so number two, another major outcome of this podcast is that a lot of the times when we get on sales calls with people and when we are talking to new potential clients, it's crazy. But what will happen a lot of the time is they will start using our language back with us. Our clients are literally coming in pre-sold. I've been on sales calls where the most unique sales call I was on was about a year and a few months ago. I don't do sales calls anymore. We have a team now for that. But back when I was doing the sales calls, the weirdest call I was ever on, I got on and I haven't asked permission to share this, but so I won't use her name, but the business owner who jumped on, we talked for a couple minutes. I built some rapport and I said, hey, do you mind if I jump into my process? And she's like, oh, absolutely. I want you to know we're going to join your program. I've listened to enough of the podcast to know that we should be in it, but I really want to see how you sell it. And I remember thinking, if that's not the absolute most massive argument for doing a podcast, I don't know what is. It blew me away. And another place where we've had just massive effect is on hiring. We don't really have a challenge with hiring anymore. The podcast is literally pre-training and indoctrinating and having people join our movement who eventually come and join our team. And I think every person we've hired recently has listened to a ton of the podcast episodes. In fact, I just had a interview this week with Luke, who is joining our team as a new coach. And he was using our language back so much in our interview with him, and when we tested him in coaching, and when we put him through, some of the questioning that we did, that we absolutely laughed about it. We thought, he could have been trained already. He answered the questions like he'd already gone through our training, and that is all due to him listening to the podcast. So, if you as an entrepreneur are willing to put your best information out there and build an audience, the benefit to you will be overwhelming. And for us, it was almost immediate. And so let me share with you some of the way that I've done this, like what you need to know. If you're going to do a podcast, I'll share with you the way that I've put this together. So number one, every day I treat this like a conversation with our client, and I sit down and I get centered and I think of myself having a one-on-one coaching conversation with somebody. What would I actually tell our real clients? What would I share with people who have paid us money? What's the best and most complete and total advice I can give in this situation and hold nothing back? And that's what I've done every single day and tried to make an effect with every podcast. I want to change behavior every time I light this up and share with somebody. The second thing is, on our podcast, I share the same advice we give our clients. I don't say, oh, we tell our clients other things, you have to join our program. I just share it right out there. I'll share what our clients hear. I'll share what the people who pay us money would get as coaching. In fact, a lot of cases, I'm recording podcasts based on clients' questions, and then my team sending that client the question. So a lot of times you're listening to the exact feedback that our clients in our high-end programs get, and we wouldn't have it any other way because, again, this is an audience that we feel pays us with time and attention. And I don't think a lot of people look at it that way. And I think that's a mistake. Because if you look at the people who are consuming your free content in the world as clientele who are paying you in time and attention, you'll put out the best stuff. You'll worry about your retention numbers. You'll look at how many people you're actually serving in that way. And that has created a massive influx of business for us. In fact, a lot of people have come to us referred by somebody who listens to our podcast that is not a business owner, that maybe is a starting up entrepreneur, or maybe works in an entrepreneurial business, or believes they're an entrepreneurial personality type. So that has created an intensity with which people come towards us because we give the real advice. In fact, In the archive podcast, the first 50 to 100 podcasts, a lot of those come out of a product we used to sell live for $3,000. Like that was exact verbiage, exact content that I would use in a live event to help people overcome limiting beliefs and to help people get out of their own way and to help people and create as much momentum as possible. So we put our best content on this podcast. And then here's another thing that you should know. If you're thinking about doing this, if you ever considered it, our podcast is leveraged like crazy. So I record this podcast, and then here's what my team does. It gets turned into articles, emails for our list, blog posts, social media posts, even more. Sometimes we create entire ebooks out of a series of podcast episodes. In fact, if you go back to episodes 180 to 200, I actually recorded 20 episodes called around the billionaire code, our matrix of the levels you go through to become a $100 million entrepreneur. And that is being turned into a book. So this podcast isn't just record once and put it out. We get a ton of leverage and a ton out of this. And so, if I had to think about if I had to share what the biggest outcome has been from creating the Momentum podcast, is that this is the most ongoing and connected communication we have with our international movement. And by using the leverage that iTunes and all of the podcast distribution systems give you, we've gotten a massive audience that I don't know there's any other way we would have gotten it. And we know that people listen to the podcast daily. In fact, we have people tell us all the time, I listen every day. And if there's ever been a time where we had a technical issue or something happened with me and we weren't able to put out a podcast episode, we hear about it. So we know people really care. And I think that has been one of the most compelling dynamics of doing this, is that every business is a social movement. And what I'm able to do on a daily basis is make the argument for our social movement. I can advocate for entrepreneurs. I can defend entrepreneurs against the people who are attacking them. I can show you, I can define and unify our movement. I can show the plan that we have. I provide a plan. We have a matrix for creating a movement. It's define and unify who you want to serve. Provide a plan that's simple, that everybody understands. Defend your movement louder than anybody else and advocate for your movement louder than anybody else. And the podcast has given me a platform to do that every day, 4 days a week, to create this movement and to keep it vital and alive and growing. And so I want to thank you for being a podcast listener, and thank you for listening to the Momentum podcast. 500 episodes is huge. I can't imagine where we're going to be at 1,000. And I appreciate you and everybody else who listens. And I'll just share one insight with you. If you ever decide to do a podcast, I want you to know that feeling of imposter syndrome that I had the first day where I could barely get it done, it goes down over time, but not that much. In fact, there are weeks where I still face resistance every time I hit record on the podcast. And, it might go down over time, but there's still days where I hit record and in the back of my mind, I'm thinking no one's going to listen to this episode. So if you ever decide to do this and put yourself out there this way and you face massive resistance and you can feel the strength of resistance pushing against you and making it more difficult for you to actually go through, here's what I want you to know. We all feel it. We've all been there. We've all felt like the imposter, but this is one of the single most powerful things I've ever done in my business. So if you've ever thought of doing it, just hit record every day, start talking, and it'll work itself out. I know it has for me. Thanks for being a podcast listener. And if you are willing, when you finish this episode, go to iTunes and leave us a review. My team reads the reviews. We share them in our huddle. We haven't gotten one in a few, maybe a week or two. And if you're willing, just leave us a review. Let us know what you think of the podcast. I would really appreciate it. And thanks again for being a listener. Share this with your friends. Help us build this audience. Help us build this movement of entrepreneurs who are creating momentum and changing the world.